Hi, I'm David Greenberg. I'm the author of John Lewis, A Life, and here are 5 facts that you may not have known about John Lewis. One of the first things is the situation of his childhood. He grew up really in abject poverty. He was one of 10 siblings born to Eddie and Willie Mae Lewis, who were sharecroppers. They had a very difficult life. They all shared bedrooms, they shared beds, no hot water. They would use a kind of zinc tub to wash themselves. And John Lewis, as a young man, was also a devoted and voracious reader. And this led him to want to go to college, which was his first step out of that poverty and into the milieu in Nashville, where he comes across the budding civil rights movement. A second important fact about John Lewis is just how thorough and complete was his devotion to the ideals of integration and nonviolence. There were a lot of people in the movement who heard Martin Luther King talk about nonviolence, but they treated it as a tactic. But for John Lewis especially, it was something he felt to the core of his being. And throughout his career, he really always strove never to waver from those ideals. At one point, he is on the scene in Selma when a white supremacist attacks Martin Luther King, and John Lewis, being nearby, seizes the man in a bear hug. Afterward, Lewis says how bad he feels because this was not in the spirit of nonviolence. So even when he's doing something that obviously most of us would think of as a very legitimate thing to do, Lewis is evaluating, is this in keeping with the ideals that I'm trying to live by? A third fact is just how important his wife Lillian was to his career. In 1968, John Lewis has basically been kicked out of the civil rights movement as it's taken a very radical turn. He's seen the assassination of Martin Luther King. He's been working on the presidential campaign of Bobby Kennedy, who's then assassinated. And he's really at an all-time low. And he has just started dating a woman named Lillian Miles. And Lillian sort of finds him at this low point, and that's when they decide to get married. And for the second act of his life, you might say, it's Lillian who in many ways is the driving force. She's ambitious on his behalf. She believes deeply in him, and they have a really tight partnership. In many ways, it's Lillian who's the driving force behind John Lewis's political career of the 70s, 80s, 90s, and afterward. What I also discovered about John Lewis is that while we all know him as a man of great principle, he also was a rather canny, pragmatic, sometimes you might even say opportunistic politician. He learned that in politics, principle is important, but so is winning. And he was quite shrewd in a lot of his votes, in a lot of his strategizing. This is a side of John Lewis I think that people don't really know. They know the moral fervor. They know when he takes a principled stand, and he did take many. But John Lewis, the smart politician, is one that readers may be surprised to discover. An interesting sidelight about John Lewis is that he was a tremendous collector of art, particularly of African American art. His home was full of it. His office was full of it. He would go to auctions. He would go to art fairs. And he really knew what he liked. In particular, he liked stories that told of the African American experience. And that side of John Lewis, the art collector, as well as a whole range of other hobbies, are another revelation, I think, of this book.